Another explanation is this idea of the dual labor market. Somebody know the difference between the primary and secondary jobs labor market? Yeah.
Primary tend to be more like careers. There's not a whole lot of turnover. You can be involved in what you stay with it to be retired. Secondary tends to be a lot of tends to be lower class, less jobs that require less education, turnover a lot.
Okay, so he's saying that primary labor market is more like jobs, like corporate managers. That's going to be more of the primary labor market. The secondary labor market is generally going to be lesser skilled. It's going to require lower levels of education, and it's going to be marked by a much higher degree of turnover. And it's also going to be marked by relatively poor working conditions too. You know, places like maybe factories or different service sector jobs. What's a service sector job? So I can be clear that you guys know what that is. Somewhere like McDonald's looking at hamburger, that's something that you would experience in the service sector. Okay, that's just one example of that. Okay, so a lot of women we find tend to be kind of funneled into these secondary labor markets, whereas men are more likely to end up as the CEOs of the Fortune 500s, right? Or to be middle managers or upper managers, or have these kind of more corporate, stable jobs. What are some examples of jobs in the informal sector? Yeah.
Kind of like the other table jobs, like working for a big construction company where they pay you cash, so it's not really a formal job.
So like babysitting.
Yeah.
So babysitting is just one of those kind of under the table things where people just give you money. You don't necessarily pay on your taxes or anything, but you're also not really an employee either. I would also argue that part of this idea of the informal sector is illegal jobs, prostitution, for instance. Okay, so that's also under the table, but it's not going to be seen as something legal or something you should be doing or anything. Essentially, if you got caught doing that, prostitution, you get put in jail, whereas if you got caught doing babysitting, you're probably not going to get put in jail, even if it is under the table, right? So again, a lot of women do find themselves in the secondary labor market and also find themselves in the informal sector, either as babysitters, as daycare people, or even in illegal positions. So, some specific, more traditional theories of social inequality. First one being functional. What is functional theory? What would they say about the differences between men and women? Yeah. Yeah. What would a functionalist say?
He's a inequality is something
He's saying, okay, so he's saying that inequalities help to make society function. You use the word good, but maybe we'll look at the term function. That maybe, you know, like the argument that we had at the very beginning of the class, are men are going to be better at some jobs, maybe, and women are going to be better at other jobs, maybe. They would also say that men are going to be more likely to fill instrumental roles, the idea of like being an accountant or manager, as opposed to women are more likely to be expressive roles, which are going to be kind of more emotional, or they're going to be caring for children, or they're going to be keeping the home, or different things that are going to be more dealing with this idea of emotion. So the next one is this idea of conflict. Again, what would a conflict theorist say about the differences between men and women? Say that again?
Women just get in the way.
Women just get in the way? They don't add anything. I think conflict theorists would argue that maybe women aren't as important, or that they devalue women. And some conflict theorists might even say that if we devalue women, we can actually treat them as if they're a lower class, so that we can use them as cheap labor. So if we're devaluing a woman who's in an educational situation or a nurse, we can extract her labor, we can have her job, but for a much lower cost. Okay. next one, symbolic interactionism. Most of you are engaged in this right now. What would a symbolic interactionist say? Say that again. She's saying it's because we do stuff because it has meaning to us. Kind of. I saw it over here.
Kind of like our interaction with you, like learning from you and then applying it to our lives.
He's saying it's like learning from me and then applying it to your lives.
Our conversation with someone, what we do.
Conversations. You're both kind of right in the sense that symbolic interactionists believe that we are essentially creating our gender roles in the process of our interaction. So conversation, in some sense, would be an example of that. Another example would be of somebody doing gender. Let's see if I can find a good example of somebody doing gender here. If you think you're a good example of doing gender, I'll have you stand up, just because you're not trying to embarrass you, but okay. So an example of doing gender. So pull your hair back a little bit so you can see your really cute earrings. You see those? She's got the long hair and it's curly. It looks really cute. She's got really cute earrings on it. She's got a very nice kind of flowy blouse on. Okay, now I'll embarrass this person as well. This person, on the other hand, has got like the rugged kind of tough shoes on and the jeans, and the hoodie, and all these different things. If you look at this picture, you guys can go ahead and sit down, thank you. If you look at this picture, this is kind of reflecting the same thing that how these guys were kind of portraying their gender, how they were doing gender. One of the ways that you do gender, of course, with symbolic interactionism is how you dress. So when people are interacting with each other and you're doing gender, that you're creating these gender roles all at the same time. And you're reinforcing it all at the same time. The way that you interact and the way that you dress, the way that you present yourself, and even the way that you speak sometimes. Okay? All right. Another set of theories are feminist theories. Who here considers themselves a feminist? Woo! There's one. Any other people consider themselves feminists?
What is a feminist?
What is a feminist? Good question. What is a feminist? Yes.
Women who fight to be valued as well as men, and like who also read about feminism and are activist groups, and who like really like, I don't know, like I'm an activist, like I read like a few books yesterday on like feminism, like really interesting. Or like people like know it's human history about like you're feminist, like I don't know.
So she's saying that it's basically women that are fighting to be given some equal rights, but also to be valued as much as men, and that in some cases these feminists are very, very dedicated to reading feminist theory and to being very activists.
So that's looking for female equality or female superiority?
Depends on what feminist you're talking to. And actually, I don't think any of them really necessarily argue for female superiority so much as equality in the sense of value or laws or things like that. It will depend on, again, on the feminists. And we'll get to the specific ones. I would like to argue that my husband is a feminist. Is that possible? Yes. Why is that possible? I heard some yeses, so tell me why. He values women, thinks they're important, and thinks that they should get the respect that they deserve. I agree. And they what? That they're not getting the respect that they deserve. Yeah. Men can be feminists. Okay, you're saying that you don't have to have the label feminist to believe in having female kind of more equal rights of being valued. That's possible, but I would also like to kind of point out that I thought it was very interesting that people in this class seem very, very shy or very holding back in terms of whether or not they wanted to identify as a feminist. Why is that? Why is it that we have a negative connotation? Why is it that we see feminism as being a bad thing? Because otherwise I think a lot more people would be raising their hands on this. Go ahead.
I think you see it as a bad term because we empower women who are feminine